Hey, welcome to Encounter Grace, where we help thinking Christians think clearly. I'm Jason McKnight in the studio here with Justin Tillman. Justin, what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about joy.
Well, this ought to be a good one.
Yeah, I'm really joy-filled to talk about joy. I'm excited.
It's not even Christmas, and we're doing something on joy.
Makes me think of Clark Griswold. Joy to the world. Sorry.
Wow, that's our first song for the for the Greatest Hits album. Well, the reason we're going to talk about
Can you
joy,
talk about Clark Griswold on here?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, just certain parts. The reason we're going to talk about joy is because our brains are wired to run on the fuel of joy. And this is a brand new idea to many of us. Before the last 2 years, and then really the last year, I haven't given much thought at all to what it is my brain is fueled by. But neurological insights over the last 25 years have demonstrated that joy, I thought this was a Sunday school and a sermon and a theological thing, but joy is more central to our physiological thriving than anyone previously understood. In fact, we can get all the way to the point of this statement that we started with. Our brains are hardwired to run on the fuel of joy.
Not caffeine, not sugar.
Although those help.
They do.
They all have their part.
Speed up the joy pathway.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're going to do then is to unpack that phrase. Our brains are wired to run on the fuel of joy. We're going to talk a little bit about our brains. We're going to talk a little bit about what fuel means. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what joy is. And we're going to mesh it all together. So you got to keep track as we go. I mean, we're not doing it in that order. We're just going to talk about it all.
Yeah. And I think this is good because joy, you said earlier, I think when people think joy, they think happiness 2.0 or happiness on steroids. And sure, happiness is part of it. But I think hopefully by the end of today, folks will have a better understanding of what joy is, so that when we say return to joy or your brain's fueled on joy, we're not saying it's all rainbows and unicorns all the time, because this also powers you through difficult situations when you're not feeling happy, when you're angry or frustrated or ashamed.
Well, and I think so let's go to scripture first and pull out at least one verse, and there's probably more that'll jump in. But you know that great Nehemiah verse, chapter 8, verse 10, the joy of the Lord is our strength. Well, what does that mean? The joy of the Lord is our strength. What does that mean? What does our strength mean? Well, change it and say it like this. The joy of the Lord is our energy. The joy of the Lord is our strength. It's our energy. It's our power. The joy of the Lord is our propellant or our fuel. And there we get to this idea that brains are wired to run on the fuel of joy. Actually, I think it comes out of Scripture. When they work best, our brains are fueled not by fear or pride or ambition or FOMO or envy, but when they work best as God's design for us, what's coursing through the veins of our brains, as it were? It isn't ambition, pride, fear, or anything like that. It's joy. You are most like the person God designed when joy is the biggest thing going on in your brain. Not laziness, not fear, not anger. When you're being led by anger, led by fear, led by pride, you're not at your God-intended best. This is revolutionary to me.
Yeah, and I think you've said that before in an earlier episode when we were talking about joy, that the me that is present when I'm frustrated or angry or when I'm feeling shame, that is not the truest me. And I think that's an important, you just said it there towards the end, that was a big thing for you, but I think that's an important distinction for us to make, is that's what we're saying today. Mm-hmm. Those are bents in your character, flaws in your character that are really there because of the fall. So if we want to get back to, well, what did God intend? Well, that's a freeing feeling to think that, well, the me that's frustrated, the me that can get angry easily, the me that can really wrestle with shame, that's not the real me. That's not who God designed me to be.
And when I'm making decisions out of shame, or when I'm speaking words out of fear, or when I'm hiding in the corner because I'm frightened or angry. Those things are leading me, shame, fear, anger. But when joy is what's helping me make my decisions or speak the words or take actions, that's what we're talking about. Yeah. Is like you just said, the God-designed self. It's amazing to think that before the Garden of Eden, there's no pride, there's no fear, there's no anger. Well, there's no sinful anger. I don't really know. But imagine that. No shame, no pride, no fear, no sinful anger. We are all running on joy. Yeah. Back there running around naked in the Garden of Eden, Justin. Not you. Just Adam and Eve, thankfully. We don't want any more than that.
Yeah, no.
All right, well, we need to discover then if our God-designed selves are running on the fuel of joy. And when fear or pride, ambition, whatever it is, come in, shame, that's actually not how God designed us, but it does affect how we act. And if these things lead us, then we're not leading out of how God called us. Well, we need to figure out what is joy and how do I get more of its fuel?
Yeah.
Like we need to see how we can mainline it into the process here.
So if joy is not happiness 2.0, Jason, what is joy?
Well, I like that. I like that it's not happiness 2.0, although I do think happiness is part of it. And we'll come to that in a minute. But I think there's a couple of different ways we can say, all right, what is joy? A first way to think about it is that it's the feeling of well-being in the deepest part of our soul, or an anchored contentment in our lives. Kind of all is well. Mm. Now, that doesn't mean all is great and healthy and fun and going my way, but like Paul could write in Philippians when he's in the middle of a Roman prison, he could say, rejoice in the Lord, rejoice with me. He's doing it. So there is a well-being in the deepest part of his soul. There's an anchored contentment. I also think that it has to do, because of how I know God's wired us, I think joy and our relationships are inextricably linked. And so joy is part of a huge foundational part of our joy is that it's the grasp that our relationships are good. Mm. Our relationships, they're not fraught. They're not filled with insecurity or codependency or fear or anything like that. But our relationships are good. The people that we're with are glad we're with them. Yeah. Whether it's, and that, I mean, it's not just coming in the store and the guy's trained to say, welcome. Like, that's not what we're talking about. I mean, it's those closest to you. It's your friends. It's your family. You know you belong. You know they belong to you. You know you're there together. Yeah, you have your ups and downs. I mean, Susan and I can have our disagreements, and they can even get ugly when she does it wrong. And yet, while there's some of that frustration, man, there's a deep and abiding joy knowing that I know we'll work through this because we're married. We're in this together, and we've been down that road before. So the joy that can be described as I'm glad to be with you sense that we receive from others. It's amazing how many times in Scripture God talks about his own face or his own smile. So we are in Numbers in Grace right now on Sunday mornings, and the blessing we use at the end is the number 6 Aaronic blessing. Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you. Mm-hmm. And be gracious to you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace. Well, what is lift up the light of his countenance upon you? What is make his face shine upon you? It's certainly not frowning, scowling, ignoring. It's got to be a joy-filled face. But God wants to bless his people, saying, friends, my people, remember I'm smiling on you. He wants us to know that he has joy with us. What about Zephaniah 3, where Zephaniah says, the Lord delights in us. He rejoices over us with singing. Mm. I mean, so many of us, we don't think of God like this, but hallelujah. He thinks of himself like this.
Yeah.
He's glad to be with us.
And that glad to be with us, I think it's important to note that is in spite of the difficult parts of us.
Right.
Because it's one thing to say, well, I'm glad to be with you when you're doing what I want you to do or when I like the things about you. This is a settled, I'm glad to be with you, kind of like you were talking about with example, you and Susan, I'm glad to be with you even in the midst of difficulty. The relationship is bigger. And so we will weather this together, and you will not be alone. Because I think that's where, that to me is the part that's life-changing, is when someone is glad to be with me, even when I have those quirks or those shortcomings, they're still glad to be with me.
And as always with God, it's even better than the analogy with human relationships, because he is initiating, and he's initiating in spite of our sinfulness, rebelliousness, eneminess. Romans 5. He loved us and gave his son for us, Galatians 2, when we were enemies, sinners, rebels, going against him. He set his love on us. He said, I'm going to show you joy. I'm glad to be with you, even though you don't even know me and don't want to be with me and are running away from me. I'm going to woo you. And this means not only my current feeling of failure to the Lord, but still he shows his face shining upon us in joy. But it's actually the whole environment of our relationship, because it's initiatory from God, and he's bringing us in spite of our rebelliousness and sinfulness. So amen.
Yeah.
He's shining that face on us.
Yeah.
And that's how he starts, by blessing us. I mean, this is an amazing thing. So joy, God wants us to know this and live this, and to have the sense that he's always glad to be with us.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's tough. It's tough because we don't get that anywhere else in life. Even as parents, we get fed up with our kids.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's why I think it's important for us to understand what joy is, because for that very reason, we don't typically experience it with people. So
yeah, or long term.
Yeah.
It's cultivated and so forth. But it is relational, and I think this is how we started this, is that joy isn't just something that we have in a vacuum, in a silo, on our own. This well-being in the deepest part of our soul, that this settled, anchored contentment, also is part of the people around us.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing, because we're wired for relationships. In fact, we're going to talk about that later on, how important our wiring for relationships is. But because we're wired for them, God links joy in our lives to the others in our lives. Hey, they're glad to be with me. That makes me at home.
Yeah. And
that's where joy is. Yeah. Now listen, we did talk a minute ago, is not happiness 2.0. I like this. And I just thought we'd riff for a minute here on different words that the world might use, or we might use, or kind of all dance around this idea. So there's joy or happiness. There's pleasure. That's also a word in here. Gladness, contentment, satisfaction, gratification. Like, these are all concepts or ideas in this thing, in this realm of what we're talking about, where we're using joy. And I would say joy is the root of them all and the pinnacle of them all. But each of them adds in different ways. Like pleasure, this is a good feeling you have now. That's something pleasurable. And usually because of something external. And that's a good thing. That's from God. It's not quite joy, but it's good. Gratification, here's another word. Well, gratification, if you're gratified, it's because you're achieving something pleasurable. Well, that's great. Then there's satisfaction or contentment. I think these are related. The sense that, you know what, things are good in life. It's maybe not this minute, that's pleasure, but this moment, that's satisfaction, contentment. Things are good right now. I'm fine. I don't have to be hungry, striving, working, circling, spinning. I'm pleased with what is. Satisfaction, contentment. And then I even think you throw the last two in there, gladness and happiness. These are states of being that most nearly reflect joy, but it just sometimes they come, sometimes they go.
Yeah.
But they're all kind of related, gladness and happiness, to joy. And when joy is the root and pinnacle, that's a really good thing. There's a little more gladness.
So when you talk about joy being the root and the pinnacle, how do you discern between, or the difference between joy and just feeling good in the moment? Because like those words you just listed, I can associate a feeling with a lot of that. And what we're saying is joy is that, but that's not all of it. So how do you begin to discern the difference between?
Yeah. So you may not be joyful, but you still can be happy or pleasured.
Mm-hmm.
But joy is a root of all these things. And so maybe a pleasurable experience, like a warm sun on an afternoon and then the breeze comes by or something. That's a pleasurable experience and you enjoy that. You still may be filled with depression or anxiety or fear, but you can still experience some of those momentary gifts of God. But when joy is the root, you also receive that as yet another expression of, man, the Lord is good, and here we are. And
so it's almost like joy is this undercurrent underneath where you may be having happy experiences or pleasurable experiences, and those are rooted in that joy, but joy is the underlying theme or current where you can experience those things, but also feel a sense of belonging or peace or shalom, whatever you want to call it, in the midst of even a difficult situation.
Well, and that's the point, even a difficult situation.
Yeah.
So with joy as the undercurrent or the root or foundation, yes, then the displeasurable experiences, you can endure those, you can walk through them, you can come back to a state of joy faster, even when you're kind of been rocked a little bit. You get a phone call, someone's in an accident. Well, you can still, and again, joy does not mean silly frivolity or always with a smile. Joy just means an anchored contentment.
Yeah.
A settled state that things are going to be, because God is leading you in relationships, they're going to be okay.
And that's more than just a definitional shift. I mean, I think that's important for people to understand early on when we're talking about joy, because I think to your point earlier, so often we associate joy with, that's a synonym for happiness. So, when I can say, well, you need to have joy in the difficult, joy in the suffering, which is a scriptural theme.
Yeah.
Well, how do you do that if joy is happiness? I can't be happy in suffering. Nobody's asking you to be happy in suffering. Joy is that underlying current of, even in, like Paul said, whether in want or when I have everything I need, I'm content. Mm-hmm. So there's this underlying theme of, regardless of what's going on around me, I know other people are glad to be with me and God is glad to be with me. Mm-hmm. So everything is okay.
An anchored contentment.
Yeah.
And so part of what we're doing here in these few minutes is expanding our understanding of the word joy.
Yeah.
So that we no longer put joy and happiness and pleasure all on the same shelf.
Yeah.
Joy goes on a deeper shelf that affects things in different ways. Happiness is still legit, pleasure is still legit, et cetera, but joy isn't quite on that synonym shelf.
Yeah.
So that's why we're going back and forth over this, to kind of show ourselves and remind ourselves of that. So if you're most like the true you when you're living in joy, when you're led by joy, when you're anchored and rooted by joy, in other words, when you're fueled by joy, the joy of the Lord is my energy. If the joy of the Lord really is your energy, if it's the root and the pinnacle of our experiences, how do we get there?
Yeah.
Now let's get into some hows. What's going on? And then what are some practices later on that can help us recover joy if we lose it, or live more by the joy that God has given us, or understand it better? So we'll, in the third half of the show, we'll talk about that. But right now, that'll be later, practices to help fill up that fuel. But right now, let's talk about joy as the fuel, and let's talk about our brains. Even though we're using our brains to talk about our brains, let's put them under a microscope and study them for a little bit. What is going on up in that gray matter, which I don't have a lot of. Mine's getting smoother and smoother with each passing year. Well, let me start this. I mean, Justin, you jump in, because we have talked about this before in our church, but also in different settings. We are going to see that our brains, what we're gonna do here is talk about how our brains run on joy. And here's the hard part to go and introduce this phrase, the joy elevator. I always am a little sheepish introducing that because I'm like, the joy elevator, I don't know. What are you talking about here? What's going on? But what we have to do is use a metaphor because we're not in our brains. And so if you think about an elevator, and if you think about an elevator that carries joy or is fueled by joy or helps our brain work better, and the idea is the elevator has to get to the top floor for full joy.
Yeah.
And if the elevator stops at any lower floor and lets out the cargo at the lower floor, which we'll tell you what the cargo is in a second, we're going to be in trouble. We won't be operating on joy. Yeah. We'll be operating on other things, and we'll talk about them. But if you get this, there's an elevator going up and down. If it lets cargo out anywhere before the top floor, it's not ideal. You'll get through it. It'll be all right. So you'll have to confess more.
You literally want your elevator to go all the way to the top.
Well, Justin, it's right there for you to make that. I can't believe.
But to your point earlier on joy, as we were just finishing up that first part of the you operating out of joy is the truest you. I think it's important for folks to recognize as we're getting ready to transition into what's going on in the brain, where joy, when they've done brain scans and all that fancy stuff, where joy occurs is in the same place that our sense of identity is formed.
Whoa.
Which is why, to your point, when we're operating out of joy, we're operating out of our truest sense of who we are and who God's created us to be. And just naturally, he's positioned the two in the same place in the brain.
Say that again and make sure I don't miss that.
Oh, I don't.
This is good.
Well, you're talking about joy. When we operate out of joy, we're operating out of the truest sense of who God made us to be. And physically, that's confirmed in that when they've done brain scans, when the brain lights up, the area of the brain that lights up when joy is experienced is the same area of the brain where our sense of identity is housed. So joy and identity are located in the same place, which to me backs up that point of you saying when we're operating out of joy, we're operating out of the truest sense of who God made us to be.
Yeah. And not only is it our identity center is coterminous with a joy center, it's the same thing. Also, our action center, our executive function center is that same place. It's almost as if God said, I'm going to put an HQ in there. And he did. And its joy is in the headquarters. Isn't it so great? You know, when Hitler was the headquarters of Germany, fear was in the headquarters. Like he ruled by fear. Aren't you glad God didn't have that?
Yeah.
Or, you know, whatever else, shame or whatever. But no, in the center of who we are and in the center of our best actions, that's the joy center, the action center, the identity center. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm glad I had skipped that. I had missed that by accident. So I'm glad that you read my notes better than I do.
I'm looking out for you.
So the joy elevator, and where it goes up to the top is to that identity center, that action center, that joy center, which is why it's the joy elevator.
Yeah.
It starts at the bottom, gets to the top. Now, one more thing we need to do before we start getting in the elevator and going up and down. And my grandmother used to live in a high rise, and when all the cousins used to visit, we'd press all the buttons. We're back in the 70s here. You'd get arrested and thrown in jail today, but her poor neighbors, all 15 floors of her building, man, we get all 4 of those elevators riding up and down.
It's like that scene in Elf where he runs every light on the elevator.
That's it. Thankfully, she didn't have 70 stories. It was just about 10 or 15. Okay, the other thing to say about our brains, and this everybody knows or maybe you've heard of or whatever, but we're just gonna dwell here for a second, but that our brains are divided into a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. And they actually engage the world in different ways. They're both always involved. So it's not like, oh, you're artistic, you must only have a right hemisphere or something like that. Or you're an engineer, you must only be left-brained. No, it's not that at all. They're all engaged in both things. However, and it's in the caveats that happen. But what are some general characteristics of our right hemisphere and our left hemisphere? By the way, so Jim Wilder, Daniel Kahneman, didn't he write Thinking Fast and Slow? And then Ian McGilchrist, who wrote The Master and Its Emissary back in 2009. All these folks are dancing around this same stuff. And not just these, but again and again and again. Everybody knows there's a right and a left hemisphere. So what is it that God's designed in our right hemisphere? What is it that God's designed in our left hemisphere? Well, You can correct me if I'm wrong, but
you're quite literally double-minded.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And the beauty is, so yet another example of how God always brings unity from diversity. The brain.
Yeah.
It's two different things, but it's one thing.
Yeah.
The right and the left. Anyway, because the right side, how does the right side engage the world around it or the experiences that it's in? Well, the right side sees the whole picture all at once.
Mm-hmm.
The left side sees the component parts. It's just how we do it.
Yeah.
The right hemisphere feels and senses things precognitively. The left hemisphere thinks things through cognitively, reasons them out. This is all happening at once.
Mm-hmm.
The right, let's say, sees the person to engage. The left sees the problem to handle, or the problem to solve, or the problem to fix in the case of my wife. No, she's fixing it. No, she's not. No, but the person, the problem.
Yeah.
Senses things precognitively on the right, thinks things through, reasons them cognitively on the left, sees the whole picture, sees the component parts.
Yeah. And this is important to know because you can go back to Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. They're both operating. One's operating faster than the other one, which you mentioned precognitively. And so it's important for us to know, like you said earlier, because we all have a right and a left hemisphere in our head, these processes are running for us, for all of us. This is just how we're interacting with the world. So that's why we're making a big deal of, well, what's the right hemisphere do? What's the left hemisphere do?
Yes. So there's two reasons we're making a big deal of it. One is that the right hemisphere process is faster and the left hemisphere process is slower. The whole picture all at once is there, and then the left hemisphere thinks it through and catches up, and the feeling and the sense and the in the moment, and then it's reasoned out and it's thought about. The person is engaged, and then the problem is considered. And in fact, the right hemisphere acts 6 times a second and the left hemisphere acts 5 times a second. So it's not that it's one's at light speed and one's, dial up.
Yeah.
But it's that it's the right hemisphere is working 20% faster. So things just come about faster as it just processes. Now, the second reason we're saying all of this, not only is the right hemisphere processing faster, you can also think about it this way. And if you think about it, what I'm about to say will help you understand why we're talking about this, is that when we experience something, you can conceptualize that experience entering our brain through the right hemisphere. And moving over to the left hemisphere to finalize decisions. So we experience something through the fast brain first. Well, it kind of makes sense because it's moving
faster.
So we experience it on the right hemisphere first, and it kicks over to the left hemisphere to decide what to do, how to respond, what to say, where to go. And the experiential all at once on the right moves over time, and it might be half a second, it might be a tenth of a second, it might be 3 seconds, to the left for the plan devising side. Why does this matter? Well, remember we talked about, so joy elevator, right hemisphere, left hemisphere, fast brain right, slow brain left, and then all things coming in first on the right. I'm just going back over the 4 things. Here's the thing. If you think of the elevator, what is the cargo in the elevator that can jump out on any floor? It's the experience you're in. So when the experience happens, it jumps into the elevator, which is on the right hemisphere, in our little model, and moving up the floors to the 4 floors. And here's the thing that I never knew, we're learning. This elevator door can open on any floor, and this cargo can jump out on any floor and move over to the left hemisphere where something's going to get done about it. But if it moves out on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd floor, it will be a false start what we do. It won't be our best self. We won't be led by joy. We might be led by shame or fear or anger or something else. It's not until it gets to the 4th floor of the brain in the right hemisphere, that joy center, that then it can kick over and be fueled by joy.
It's fully processed and ready to be acted upon in a meaningful way.
Yeah. And this little framework, these last 5 or 6 minutes, absolutely revolutionary for me. And as we break down each of the floor, 1 minute each over the next couple of minutes, what are each of these 4 floors on the right hemisphere? And you're going to jump in a lot because I'd left a lot of blanks for you to fill in. But as we think this through, it's like, oh, that's what you can think back over good and bad experiences you've had, good and bad decisions or reactions. And you're like, oh, I see that now. That little experienced cargo jumped out of the elevator on the second floor. I see that now.
My elevator didn't go all the way to the top.
Yours rarely does, Justin. No, that's not true at all. Yeah. All right. Well, anything else to add?
No, I think that's all good. And that's where the joy piece ties into the brain science that we're talking about. Is this elevator is running. It just is. You don't have a choice as to whether it's running or not. And if you want to show up as your best self, that elevator needs to run on joy.
Yeah.
So that to me, that kind of brings it all together. How did we end up here talking about a brain? Here's why.
That's exactly it. All right. Well, I think we're ready then to maybe talk a little minute on each of the 4 levels.
Load some cargo on the first floor.
Yeah. So the first floor. So the experience comes into your consciousness or into your subconsciousness, pre-consciousness, consciousness, all at once. But it kind of comes in. We're saying in the model comes in through the right hemisphere side, and the first level is the attachment center. Now, by the way, these 4 there's a medical, technical neuroscience term. We're just going to use 4 A words that are a little easier for me because I'm not a neuroscientist. And I feel like it's either Marcus Warner or Jim Wilder who developed these 4 words to correspond to
I think it was Wilder.
Okay, Jim Wilder on the neuroscience. So the first level where an experience comes in is the attachment center. And at this level, what happens in the middle of an experience, you're saying, am I connected to this person at the moment? Am I accepted by this person at the moment? Do I want to be connected to this person at this moment or these people? And basically, we've said before, earlier today, but also in past, that God has wired us to be in relationship with people. We're not wired to be loners. And so this is the most basic function of our brains is, can I attach to someone right now? Can I be connected to someone right now? And so it's like you turn on or off a light switch. You turn on the relationship switch or off the relationship switch. And it's right here at this level that if you turn off your relationship switch and you don't have anyone to attach to, or you don't want to attach to anyone, that experience, that cargo in the elevator jumps over to the left-hand side and you act on it. But you act on it in a subhuman way.
Yeah.
Because you haven't.
Yeah. So instead of coming at it from a relational, joy-filled perspective, you come at it as lashing out or angry or retreating and just
shame-filled.
Getting in your shell and avoiding. But that all happens if that gets kicked off at this first floor.
Yep.
That's how you're going to respond.
Yep. And by the way, we see, the stereotypical example of what does it look like if your relationship switch is on or off. You see that in what the world thinks of teenagers, where they don't make eye contact and they give one-word answers or grunts to their parents because they don't want to be with their parents. That's just the relationship circuits are off.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's the world's definition of them. That's not how God sees teenagers, or we do. And it's very fun to pursue people who are trying to figure out who they are, but to do it in a way that gently woos them into relationship. Like you're basically wooing a teenager to turn their relationship circuit on.
Yeah.
And pressing them doesn't do it. But inviting them, and it's amazing. And it's amazing. You see people with this gift, and I'm thinking of Will behind the sound stage over here. He's so good inviting students into relationship, and it's a marvelous thing.
Yeah.
But he's helping them turn their attachment center on, because the hormones going through your minds in a teenager.
Oh yeah,
wreaks havoc.
Yeah. So that first floor, you're asking that question: am I accepted? Am I connected to somebody? So let's say we answer that question, yes.
Yes. Or we specifically say, I feel like I'm not, I better be.
Yeah.
Hey, Justin, how are you? And I look in your eye and I listen to your answer, and I'm maybe a little bit curious to know what you're going to say. Those little simple things turn my relationship circuit on. I think also we talk about teenagers. It's easy with spouses when we're a little bit frustrated. The experience is a little bit frustrating to say, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
But if we can overcome that, and all this is level one attachment center, if we can overcome that, then guess what? We'll keep the elevator going up, and we won't let the car go out and go over to the left where I say stupid things that I regret later.
Yeah.
So then we move up to the assessment center. And so the attachment center, level one, assessment center, the second story in our right hemisphere. And really, we're just assessing one question. And it's this: is this experience good, bad, or frightening? Good, bad, or scary? That question alone allows our brain to continue processing up the joy elevator. It doesn't have to be a good experience for the elevator to keep going up. It just has to be processed. Like all you have to do is recognize, I don't like this right now. And that's enough at this level. You've verbalized that this is bad. And then your elevator, your joy elevator, can go up to the next level.
Yeah.
So again, it's not that when the good things means it moves up to joy, bad and scary kick it. No. But when you start acting before you realize that you're afraid or that this is bad and you don't like it, when you start acting before you've actually realized that, that's when you're going to make premature decisions or premature words.
And you don't know whether you're responding out of fear or anger. You just immediately lash out. And you're not naming, I'm afraid right now, or I'm ashamed right now, or I'm really angry right now. This is good. Yeah, good or bad. I think that's important because people can think, well, the bad things don't move forward. The good things only do. No, the bad things move forward too. What we're doing here, this is that guard shack, I think, idea of, is this good, bad, scary, fight, flight? Like this is all happening here. What do I need to do? And what we're saying is when your elevator is running on joy, you're able to think about and verbalize if this is a good experience, a bad experience, scary experience, before you think about what to do with it.
And what's really interesting is to do that in the middle of a conversation. Oh, I'm not liking the tone here. I'm not liking where this has gone in the last 2 minutes. And I'm just getting in touch with that. That's assessment center. When you have the thought, oh, it's dawning on me, or I'm just getting in touch with that. Now your brain is kicked into gear and the elevator can move up.
Yeah. And I think everybody has seen this. If you've ever had a conversation with someone and before you realize it, you're flushed or your ears are hot and you're like, it just catches you off guard. That's a sign of this is operating very fast. So a lot of times your body is already primed and prepped to respond before your cognitive brain is recognizing what's going on. Yep. And so all we're saying here is at this floor, you're giving yourself time to name what it is you're feeling.
Yep. And as soon as you name it, good, bad, or scary, basically, and you know what I haven't done is the background research to know why those three, but that's basically all the assessment center answers.
Yeah. This
is good, this is bad, this is scary. One of those three and away you go.
Yeah. I think it's because to get real fancy, that's where the amygdala is. And,
that's the name of the assessment.
All that does is, that's just fight or flight response. So that's why those are the only criteria it thinks through.
Right. So bad or scary, fight or flight.
Yep.
and then away we go. So we're going up from the assessment center to the next level up, which is the attunement center. Again, the A words from Jim Wilder, but attachment at the bottom, assessment second, attunement third. And this is where we're looking for someone else who can understand us. We're looking, and I mean, this is what we're looking for in all of life. For someone to understand us, for someone to take us seriously for who we are, for someone to empathize with us, not to say you're all right, they're all wrong, and they, not that necessarily, just to say, I get it.
Yeah, I recognize how big this is for you.
I recognize it.
I think of, when you're thinking about solving a conflict or solving a problem, I think this one is so important because if you can't name what the problem is, then go back to the second level and hear the person you're interacting with, especially if it's the person you're in conflict with, if you don't get a sense that they understand you, then you're going to feel like I've got to justify myself. I've got to reason with, I've got to make them understand me. And I think that leads to a lot of the tension when I feel like you're not getting me. You're not hearing me.
Yes.
What attunement says is I'm able to look at the person across from me. And while we may not agree, Jason sees that this is important to me. We may not arrive at the same conclusion, but he's sensing the weight. Yeah. And so I feel like he's understanding me. And so therefore, if he comes back with a solution or a suggestion, I'm much more apt to listen to that because I am sensing that you're understanding the weight and the depth of what I'm feeling right now.
Because attunement is not agreement.
Yeah.
It's not the agreement center.
Yeah.
So we still may be on opposite sides of the issue, but when we can understand that it's an issue, it's a big issue, or that we can express to each other, I see why you think that way. That's an attunement expression. And if we don't have that, if we don't receive that, and the cargo kicks over, this experience where I don't have anyone who's in it with me and I feel all alone in it and I can't attune with anyone, then my elevator doesn't go up. It goes over to the left hemisphere for action. I'm going to make decisions based in my silo mind.
Yeah. And based off of assumptions of what I think the other person is thinking or feeling.
Yes.
And we all know what happens when you act off of assumption.
Well, I'm always right.
That's right. You are always right.
In the assumption world. So attachment center, assessment center, attunement center. Your elevator is going up, and when you can attach, when you can turn on your relational circuits and say, I want to be in this. And then when you go next level assessment, is this good? Is this bad? Is this scary? Do I stay and fight? Do I run away? Or do I need to because it's so wonderful? I don't have just those answers gets you up to the attunement center. Am I alone? Mm-hmm. Who's with me? Is there anyone who understands me? It's not who's with me backing me up totally. It's, is there anyone who understands me? Do I have any? And I've seen this a lot. I mean, I've seen this in conversations with a husband and a wife, like husbands and wives, when the one is trying to say something and express something, whether it's a fraught marriage counseling thing or whether it's just kind of we're all at dinner together and the one is trying to say something, when the other spouse leaves them out on a limb, it's very disconcerting for the spouse on the limb.
Yeah. When
they kind of, I'm not getting involved in this one, and sometimes they have the joking way about doing that and it's not so bad at all. It's kind of how, but man, I have been in situations that have gotten really awkward because the wife or the husband hasn't come alongside in the group to offer the eye contact and the, I know this story. I love this story, or whatever. And they're looking for, we're always looking for someone who gets us.
Yeah.
Even if they don't agree with us.
Yeah. So that's 3 floors.
Well, then we
takes
get
us to the 4th floor.
Yeah. What we talked about at the beginning, the joy center, the identity center, the executive function center. This is it. So if we get through levels 1, 2, and 3, and we arrive at 4, we arrive at the El Dorado. We have found the lost ark, the Holy Grail. This is it, the joy center. This is where God intends us to make decisions out of. Now, once it hits here, the experience, the cargo in the elevator, once it hits the joy center, the 4th floor, it's supposed to go from the 4th floor automatically over now with joy, with the beginning processing into the left side, which is, let's solve this thing. Let's act on this thing. Let's do this thing. Mm-hmm. We've gone from experiencing it to living into it and doing something with it or becoming something by it. But when it gets through the joy center, the identity center, the true you, that's how it works better.
Yeah.
That's how we gain more flourishing and less trauma.
Yeah. And so if you think about walking through the floors, if you get to the 4th floor, you've said, I'm accepted. So I belong here. I've processed what this event is. Yeah. There's somebody who's with it in me. Mm-hmm. Or with me in it. Yep. And it could be another person. It can be God. Yeah. But I've recognized that someone is with me in this. And so now I can go to the 4th floor and say, all right, how is it like me to respond? How is it like for my people to respond? How is it like for someone who's God's child to respond in this situation, which is where it gets shunted over for actual joy-filled action.
Right.
So does that bring all the
joy-fueled
joy-filled?
action.
So that brings all four of the floors together.
Yep. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And some of these examples are like, maybe you're in an office meeting, and you say something like in a staff meeting, and nobody responds to it. Well, what do you feel alone?
Yeah.
Well, then you act out of embarrassment. And it happens to all of us. But that reaction out of embarrassment, you would say, and everyone else can say, that's not the best you.
Yeah.
Because, attunement level, nobody jumped on. I felt alone. I am alone. And so whatever it was, the jerk store called, George's, George Costanza, or something like that. Or you're in a discussion. There's three of you in this discussion, and the one guy is just trying to make his point, and you're not quite getting it. And you look across at the other guy who's quiet, and you sort of make a quick eye contact. That little bit, I get it. I get it. We're in this together, and let's love them into it, or let's, mock them later. No, you shouldn't do that. But, there we go. All right. Well, did you want to say anything else before we move on to the sort of practical three things at the end?
The only other thing I might add is to go back to your example. What would it, we give an example of what it looks like for the floor to short circuit, or the elevator not to go all the way to the top. Maybe what it would look like for the elevator to go to the top in that kind of situation. You're in that meeting with people, and somebody says something that catches you wrong, or you say something that catches you wrong. Reminding yourself, and this is where I go back to, even if the people around you can't connect with you, God can. Mm-hmm. So even in that moment, if you don't have someone around you, remind yourself, first floor, attachment. I'm accepted by God. Yeah, I may have said something stupid, but I'm accepted by God. Second floor, okay, this is what it is. I've acknowledged that. Third floor, is there someone here with me that can attune with me? Well, if I can't, God understands me. And so what does it look like to respond from that? Well, it might look like just saying, hey guys, you know what? That comment I made was off color. Shouldn't have said that. I'm really sorry. And moving on from it, not being controlled by the shame of what do the people think about me now. Yes. It's just, hey, I'm going to own what I just said. I don't know why I said that. Shouldn't have said it. Sorry. But the key piece with joy is not tied to shame and regret. Joy says, you know what? I acknowledge that. It is what it is. Making amends if I need to, but I'm moving on, and I'm not going to be shackled by, I'm not going to spend the rest of the day thinking about what an idiot I made of myself in front of everybody.
Or you're not going to spend the rest of the day stuffing it, moving on by not considering it. Yeah. You're going to own it.
Where everybody else is like, does he recognize what he said?
Yeah, because you're living into reality. Yeah. Everyone else recognized it. Yeah. And the moment you do, and you make it right, or you just say, hey, I'm sorry. Thanks for your grace.
Yeah.
And so there's that anchored contentment that is back. And that sense, they're glad to be with me. I don't have to worry about my standing. The insecurity is over.
Yeah.
And that happens to all of us. So that's very good. Like a positive example. I think it's easy too in a marriage, positive examples when this. So, and it's hard because habits and patterns form in marriages because we're with each other so much. Mm-hmm. And, but when a conversation can begin to turn sour, and, they're always over the simplest little things, but when it can begin to turn sour, not even like a knockdown, drag out fight, just sort of why are we never on the same page? If you can feel that that's coming and say, let me make sure, can I be connected to you right now? Let's press pause on that. How is your day? And you just do a little bit of connecting. And then while that's happening, you can also say, yeah, man, that wasn't going well. That's the assessment center. Let's try and do it differently. And so you can front load the attunement center by saying, hey, let's come back to that. I don't feel like we were on the same page, but I want to make sure I hear you out. Yeah. You are proactively attuning.
Yeah.
And it may not help you, but something as simple as that can get us to better conversations
Yeah.
in those with our kids, our spouses, which are the hardest ones.
Yeah, that's really good.
Well, you've already answered. We thought of 3 practicals to keep the joy fuel flowing. It's like you're going to the filling station, the gas station, and filling up. And you better not put non-leaded fuel in.
That's true.
Or whatever it is now. They don't even do non-leaded fuel. You better not put diesel fuel in. Okay, I think 3 quick practices to help us. And number 1 is exactly what you kind of just said, is know all of what we've just said. Know it all. But just be familiar. 2 hemispheres. The right one processes faster, and the right one is whole picture versus left one is component parts, problem solver. Things like that. Elevator, 4 levels, attachment, assessment, attunement, and then to the joy action center. Just knowing this helps us.
Yeah, I think that pumps the brakes a little bit. Yes, this is going to run.
No. We're talking about gas. We're not talking about brakes.
This is already happening precognitively. It's happening fast, but by the act of naming it and having vocabulary for it, you don't necessarily slow it down, but you bring it into your conscious awareness. Oh, okay, this is going on over here. And so it's not like it's just happening and I can't do anything about it. Well, now you can, because you know what's going on. Yeah. So you can stop and say, have I visited all the floors?
Right.
Or have I stopped short somewhere?
Right. And I think you could even go back the last 10 or 12 minutes and listen with your spouse, with your kids. And so then you can have a conversation about it. And then you can, or with your coworkers. Mm-hmm. And then this becomes part of the vocabulary, not in an accusing way. You're not attached or anything like that. That's silly. But just this is what's going on in all of us.
Yeah.
This might help us over the hump.
Yeah. Or if we're having a tension between us, being able to stop and say, hey, I think we're both sensing tension here.
Yeah. Let's
stop and keep the relationship bigger. And now that we have this vocabulary, let's think through together. Have we stopped on a floor?
Yeah.
Are we not attuning? What's going on here?
Yeah. So first quick practice, learn these things or know some of this. Be familiar that these kinds of things are happening and it's how God designed us, and that we are our true selves when the joy elevator gets to the top.
Yeah.
And if I'm acting out of shame or fear or anger, that's not the way God designed me.
Mm.
That's been revolutionary to me, by the way. And G.I. Joe used to say it, knowing is half the battle. So point number 1, know what all this stuff is and let it help you. Number 2, the next one I thought about was learn how to quiet yourself, learn how to calm yourself, return to a state of peace from fear or anger or sadness or shame. Because even if, let's say, the elevator door opens too early on floor 1, 2, or 3 and it jumps over there, you know what? You can shove that stuff back in the elevator by quieting yourselves, by shalom, peace. Let me just rest for a second.
Yeah.
What are some ways that could help us quiet ourselves?
Yeah, just a simple breathing.
It's just that.
We talk about that a lot, and it sounds simple, but it's just the way God has wired us so that deep breaths have physiological impacts on us. So just by breathing, because usually if something has jumped off the elevator too soon, you can notice it in your body. Your heart rate's up, you're feeling tense, maybe your ears are hot, you're feeling a knot in your chest because you're feeling shame or embarrassment. So we're embodied spirits. So there's a physiological response. So something just as simple as taking some deep breaths and saying, all right, this is okay. I have language for this. Let me jump back on this elevator and ride this the rest of the way up.
Yep.
So just taking deep breaths.
Isn't it amazing how deep breaths allow your brain to function better? Oxygen getting to your brain. And isn't it amazing how in a fraught situation, you can't think?
Yeah.
Some of us can, and they're wonderful, and we want to keep them around. But a lot of people, they panic or they lose the ability, and I don't mean huge panic, but just in you just said something I didn't expect, and it kind of hurt me, and I can't think of what to say back.
Yeah.
But a deep breath is going to help me think.
Yeah.
That's just the oxygen getting in
Which,
there.
to your point, it's interesting. What the example you just described, that is a telltale sign of the elevator jumping off a floor too early, a panic. Because you haven't processed it all the way through.
Yeah.
So a deep breath, just slowing down.
I also think as believers, God stands at the ready to help us.
Yeah.
So talk to him. Say, Lord, I don't know what to do. Lord, help me. Lord, give me an insight.
Yeah.
Lord, calm me down. So while you're taking the breaths, you can also be talking to God, and it can happen in 1 second. It doesn't have to be.
Or attune with him. God, do you see me in this? Are you here? Are you present?
Yes.
Because if nobody else is, I need somebody. So show me where you are.
Yep. And then wait for him. I also think, so if we're going to quiet ourselves, we're going to calm ourselves or return to a state of peace, breaths, talking to God, even the where are you in this right now, or what do you see right now? But also call to mind some scripture. Fill your mind with grace and truth if it's fraught right now. And that's just a helpful thing. Now, you can't memorize a scripture in the moment, but maybe you might have a few, like a Psalm 23, or maybe you want to memorize Philippians 2 or do something like that, or several verses here and there. We just did, 5 assurances, episode 162, I think, or 161. I mean, those 5 verses in your brain will change how you respond when you call them to mind, or when the Spirit brings them to mind, which will help calm you.
That's really good. No, I think those are very easy tools to use. They don't require a lot of willpower to do.
I was in a situation once where it was so difficult, the conversation was so difficult, that I had to not just take a few breaths or talk to God. And we were in the middle of the conversation, so I couldn't really recite a scripture. But I did have to do this. I had to take a break and go for a walk. I mean, I could not get anywhere, and I knew I wasn't thinking well. Like I couldn't get anywhere in the conversation, and I knew I wasn't coming up with new things to try. To get to some positive outcome. I could get anywhere with some negative outcomes. So I just said to the 2 other people in that room, I said, "Can you guys excuse me for just 1 second?" I walked out of the room. I walked around for 45 seconds, which is where blood circulated. I breathed. I took deep breaths on purpose. I prayed on purpose. I don't remember if I brought to mind a verse, but I would have. I know I would have. But I went back in the room 45 seconds later, and I didn't say why. I didn't, leave in a huff. You people are crazy. No, I just said, "Would you just excuse me for 1 second?" Left, came back. It changed everything. It broke the, quote unquote, it broke the spell for me. I don't know if it changed anything for them, but I was able to, and we got to more understanding and more forward motion than we had been getting to, or we had any opportunity to get to. So that idea, sometimes you just need to change the scenery, change position, let the blood move, do it.
I like that.
So learn how to quiet yourself, or return to a state of peace or shalom if you're angry or fearful or shame or sad or whatever. Because again, that lessens the fear, anger, shame, sadness, so that joy can retake its place as the fuel. When the shame is driving us, or the insecurity is driving us, joy isn't. I think a third way to access joy, and this isn't so much in the moment when things are fraught, that's the second way, but this in general in life, and building into your future life fueled by joy, is do this every day, or once or twice a day. Take 1, 2, or 3 minutes and remind yourself with the Lord of something good. The world says go to your happy place. And as hokey as it sounds, the intuition is right on, in line with neuroscience and theological value. Spend a little time in an environment where things were joy-filled, where there's gratitude. Think back to times that it was good. God says that in Genesis 1. There are those times in your life too. Well, think back to them. Maybe even have a bank of them. Somebody calls them appreciation memories, where you write a paragraph, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences describing what felt so good. And as you read that to yourself, and it's 5 sentences long, and it takes you 45 seconds to read it to yourself, you are entering into that place of gladness, that place of gratitude, that place where things are good. And that actually then changes the physiological dynamics in your body and allows for joy to happen. So again, we're not talking in the middle of the argument.
Yeah.
But as a practice in your day, why not incorporate some gratitude moments, some appreciation memories? Why not over time build in a journal somewhere on a piece of paper where you can grab it quickly when you need it?
Yeah.
And say, oh, this.
When you think about that as building your joy capacity of, when something difficult happens, what you're doing in that proactive work of joyful memories or appreciation memories is you're building the pillow that when something difficult happens, you can fall back on to help you get through the joy elevator.
Yeah.
So this is, in a sense, you're filling up the tanks so that when you need them, you have gas to pour into the joy elevator.
That's exactly it. I want to add something else to that. A couple of minutes a few times a day to remind yourself of something good. Appreciation memories is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
How about this, though? Some of us are musically inclined. And so to take 2 or 3 minutes a couple of times a day to enter into songs that you love that also are ennobling.
Yeah.
So whether it's worship music or just other music that, again, we're not talking about lyrics so bad that you wouldn't want your grandmother to listen, but things that are uplifting. When you enter into a 4-minute song, that's a great thing. If you did that twice a day, there's some room there for your joy capacity to grow, the fuel line to be cleared out. Maybe you're not musical, but you love visual. Well, make it a habit to look at the sunset. Make it a habit to have 2 or 3 beautiful paintings that you love on your computer that you get to, and you pull them out and you just spend 30 seconds or a minute looking again at that Rembrandt. Whatever turns your crank, I don't know what it is. Or maybe it's tactile. For you, it's not music, it's not visual, it's tactile. And so, boy, carpentry or baking, the smell of the baking or something. Now this, you can't do it in 2 minutes, but gosh, if you need to be in your tool shop or your craft little room or your kitchen baking or cooking or something, and these bring joy to you, don't miss them.
Yeah, make time to do
Swinging the golf club, running, don't miss these things. You might have to skip it for a day or two because you're so busy because something happened. But man, if you go 3 weeks without ever baking and you love baking, stop doing something else.
Don't be surprised that you feel irritated and frustrated.
And I offer this, the music, the visual, the baking, the golfing, because God loves all of this stuff. And when you find something that brings you life and joy, it's not just a pastime. It's also part of building the fuel and the capacity. See, sometimes when I'm really busy, I go for a run even though I don't have time. Because I do that on purpose to remind it might be a shorter run. Instead of 5 miles, it might be 3 miles. But I do that to remind myself that I belong not to the schedule, but to the Lord who created me. And I know that he can redeem the time.
Yeah.
I don't doom scroll.
See, that's where we're different. I don't run even if I'm not busy.
But you're a great golfer. So anyway, that third thing, take a couple of minutes a day or take a couple of experiences more often. Appreciation memories or else uplifting experience of music, visual arts, and then tactile things. Watch God grow in you the joy you need to do life as he designed you. Yeah. Listen, if you love carpentry and you're good at it, or you're learning it, or you're good at it, that's a gift from God.
Yeah.
So then joy is going to be there.
Yeah.
Even if you hit your thumb with the hammer.
Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, Jason.
It is kind of fun. I thank you for helping me out here as we've talked about this over the years, over the last months and so forth. And then today, thanks for adding so much more stuff to it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well, friends, we thank you for being with us today on Encounter Grace. Send this to some friends and grow your joy together and your capacity for it. And also, just watch what God's going to do, because he really has designed us to live with his energy of joy. And I'm just so thankful that it's not fear, that it's not performance. It's his fuel for our lives is joy. So go and be joyful. We'll see you next time.